Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am here with Robin Ducharme, who I met at her amazing conference this past spring up in Vancouver, which was so incredible, all about relationships. And I've been looking forward to talking with you, Robin, for months. And so I'm so grateful you're here today. Please introduce yourself. Let our listeners know who you are and what is the spark inside of you that inspires you to share all about relationships? What's your journey? How did you get here?
Well, thank you for having me, Jory. This is a pleasure. How did I get here? Well, Real Love Ready is, I started out years ago working as a matchmaker and love coach. And that journey started out because one of my very best friends moved to my city. And I was wanting to help her find her husband, find a partner, because it's something that she wanted so deeply. And we all wanted that for her too. And so I had this opportunity. I'm like, okay, I live here and I would love to set up some dates. What do you think, Kirst? And she's like, sure. So it took about 6 months before she finally made the move to where I live. And by the time she got to Victoria, I had 10 men lined up that were excited to meet her. I just kind of sold them on her and made sure that they might be a good match. I interviewed them all. And then I would set up these dates one after the other. So it was about, I think it was
I'm just
18.
fascinated. Where did you find 10 eligible men? Because I have a lot of clients and friends, and that's success right there on its own,
I know,
Robin.
and that's actually, it's funny because at the time I was working as a realtor. And so I was very connected in the industry I was in, but also I was just like, I'm just going to get creative around this. I mean, I remember like being in the dentist chair, talking to my dental hygienist saying, okay, so I've got this project. I'm trying to find my best friend and husband. And like, do you have anybody that might be with us in age range? Like, we have to be, and guess what? The more you talk about it, it was like, really, trust me, I was not short of finding great men. And I'd be asking these friends, who do you know? And they'd be like, oh, I've got this friend's brother. I'm like, perfect. All right, let's figure this out. Right. So
I love it.
It's like this law of attraction thing. So that was 2012. Fast forward to just, I guess it was, the story could go on forever, but I did do that for about 4 years. And then my twin passed away.
Oh my goodness.
My dad passed away very suddenly and I was kind of thrown into taking care of their estates for that long. Like my life kind of was put on hold as I was taking care of my family's affairs, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then
that's a lot. That's a lot all at once, Lev. Wow.
Yeah, it was. And then I was like, okay, now that I've taken care of what I had to do, it was a duty that you have to fulfill, right? I'm going to get back into the love business because I just love love. I mean, it's like my passion is being able to be the most loving person I can be. But also I just know how hard relationships are. I mean, I grew up in a family where my parents weren't doing it well. That's for sure. So my brothers and I were like, it was pretty unstable growing up.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of love, but there was not a lot of stability.
Yeah. I always say love isn't enough, right? I mean, and I'll be honest, I don't know of all my clients and even friends, not many of us have great role models.
Yeah. And so how are we supposed to be great in love if we don't have that taught to us or modeled to us, right?
And we're not following the Disney formula, which doesn't really set us up for much success either.
Right. So anyways, I went and I had a day with a really good friend of mine, Danielle Laporte, who spoke at our summit last year.
Yes.
And I said, can we please do a business strategy session? I mean, she's a rock star in so many ways, and especially in business and in spirituality and all these things that, that are very aligned with me. And I was like, I would just love your help. And so we sat down for about 4 hours and brainstormed. Like, and she was so good about like, okay, what do you love to do? Where are your gifts? And she's like, I see this. And what about this? And at the end of the day, we came up with Real Love Ready
Wow.
because I love to create very special experiences for people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to be better in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like this marrying of relationship skill building, learning, growth, and coming together, sharing experiences where we could do that collectively.
Beautiful. And going from that strategy session and this intention, how did that affect you both personally, and how long did it take to actually create and manifest what you had, in your mind and in your heart?
Yeah, well, I have to say, because from the time that I decided, okay, now I need to switch gears into love and relationship world, I went through about 7 months of, I kind of I akin the feeling to when I was like teenager. I graduated my business degree, and then a lot of us, even if we didn't go to university after high school, you don't know what the hell you're going to do with your life. I was 17 years
Right.
old, and at that point I was 21 when I graduated, and I was like, I still didn't know what I was going to do, right? And then okay, but you're kind of caught in this like, it's like rumination. What is that word?
Rumination.
Rumination.
Yes.
Rumination. And that's how I felt. I felt like for 7 months, I just wasn't getting the answers. I wasn't getting the inspiration. I wasn't getting, like, my imagination was, I tried so many different ways to,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what's my next path? But after I did have that business strategy meeting with Danielle, I really think like when I have a direction, and I know what I'm going, I can manifest things quickly.
Yeah.
So I registered a business name. I hired my communications manager at the time. I got my website going. So I got the ball rolling pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And within a year, we had the summit planned. COVID hit. We all know that how
Of
that affected
course.
all of us in this world. But um, we've since held 3 virtual summits, and our first in person was in Vancouver last April, and we're going to keep going. So it's definitely, the business is growing, and I feel really good about it.
It's amazing. And I think there's not one single person who doesn't either want to be better in relationship and need more skills. Because like you said,
Yes.
we're not taught this, we're not role modeled this. Short of Alexandra Solomon's course at Northwestern, Marriage 101, kids are not learning this. One of my
Exactly.
favorite books is Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, right? So we weren't having parents who knew how to regulate emotions, role model, naming emotions, giving space for this. And so I think this generation are really trying to figure it out and need to come into community around this, and also want to hear the real life stories, right? I mean,
Right.
this is where in my opinion, where the real life lessons come from, not just how we're trained, whether it's a therapist or reading a book. Like, okay, but that's all great. But what do you actually do in the moment?
Right. I was, and so every week, because I have a podcast, right? My podcast is called Let's Talk Love. And every week I interview relationship experts, right? Like yourself, therapists, psychotherapists, authors. And it's all about, how do we do this better? What are the skills
Yeah.
that we need, and how do we apply them? And really, what I've just been practicing, what I've discovered, is just how important vulnerability is.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to my family. I was at my brother's funeral was on the weekend. And he's my brother from another mother, but he's still my brother. And the beauty of funerals is that, is the joining of family, community, to mourn together, and how important it is that we are there to witness each other and hear each other and see each other during our pain and through our pain. And we were really like, I was just like, this is so beautiful, because we were all like, really, you can look somebody in the eye and be like, this is awful. And I'm here for you, and I'm here for you. And there's healing that.
Yeah.
So the vulnerability piece and the authenticity piece, what I'm learning and practicing as much as I can, is just getting to the very root of it. Like, where are you at really?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've put that deeply into practice. I think you had heard during your summit when I shared a little bit about the journey that John and I were on. And, I was married to my high school sweetheart, my ex-husband. I was with since I was 13 years old.
wow.
And, going through a relationship that was not nothing ever really wrong, but not really right. Right. And
Hmm.
so having the courage to recognize not having a reason to break up doesn't mean you stay together forever. And at
Right.
36 years old, going through a divorce and really like I'd never dated. I mean, how do you even begin? What are you looking for? And the joke is that I manifested John because I wrote down everything. It's kind of making me think of your like love matching part, right? Like wrote down everything that I wanted in a partner, what I was already complete in, where I still had space, and I just meditated on it. And
Wow.
I literally found him like 10 days later. It was the joke is he didn't exist before I manifested him. And my point is there was so much in alignment, and yet, almost 6.5, 7 years into our relationship, it was starting to break down. So it's like, even when you have all the skills and all the tools, doesn't necessarily mean successful relationship. And we were on and off for 6 months, and then he finally ended it. And I was devastated. It was worse than my divorce. I mean, it was
Yeah.
gut wrenchingly heartbreaking. And we were terrible at being broken up. We lasted maybe 6 weeks, but it was still a lot of trauma within that time period.
Yeah.
And since being back together, we've been really honest and vulnerable. And we both have podcasts, and we've shared our very nitty gritty story. And we've never gotten more feedback than on those episodes, sharing the truth of two therapists who couldn't figure it out. And what
Right.
I find, and so I'm curious in your years of with Real Love Ready, of what was the challenge? It wasn't necessarily him and I. It was all the unresolved shit from prior childhood, previous relationships that was truly preventing us from, whether it was being really vulnerable, trusting, communicating effectively, fully feeling safe or secure, like all those attachment styles that were being activated, right? Or the emotional sensitivities that were being activated that just got in the way of partnership. And this is where we need to just share this stuff because people are grasping for honesty in relationships.
Yes. And I think that well, I just think about so many of my friends and my family. Um, and quite a few of us have gone through divorce. Quite a few of us are, single, looking for their next partner. Um, and I think when it comes down to it, it's like we are able to be vulnerable with each
Yeah.
other. But I don't know about other because I think that's kind of. Anyways, I'm grateful about that. I'm very grateful
Yeah.
for that about being real about this is really really hard.
It
And
is hard.
I also think about the story that what you just said about because I know when we first met, you and John had just gotten back together. Um, it just makes me think like it doesn't surprise me that long-term relationships, of course, they're going to shift and change because we as human beings are
Yes.
always changing.
Yes.
That's what's so important in my next partnership
Yeah.
that um, the growth piece, the growth mindset, and we are individually we're individuals, but I also want to be with somebody that is going to focus on that self awareness, that self growth, and growing the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's actually a question I have a lot of clients ask me is how do I know if this person is worth staying with? How do I know it's worth the fight for it? Right. And my very first answer is always, are they growth minded?
Mm-hmm.
And here's the interesting thing, if I can actually break that down, because that's a question that John gets asked by his clients. And we also have joint clients. We do couples work together. And he would also answer that. But what was interesting was he's very growth minded when it came to learning. He was stuck being growth minded about his own challenges in relationships. So even within that answer, he recognized
Yes.
there's multiple answers within being growth minded. And it came down to fear. He was scared shitless.
Yes.
to really peel back the layers that was preventing him from breaking patterns he didn't think he could break until he realized, okay, I was worth doing the hard work to break the pattern with. And I'm so grateful for that because it cracked us open to believing, okay, when you do the work, anything is possible and everything is possible. But it's that courage and that vulnerability. Even if you think you're growth minded externally, are you really growth minded internally?
Internally.
It's a very different answer.
It really is. It really is. I'm in this I'm going through a very difficult breakup in my life. I was it's my second marriage, and we're on our way to be getting a divorce. It's just awful to even say it out loud, right? I just feel like it's like this. I said this before we started recording, but it's like there's a lot of shame around that. First of all, I didn't intend to get divorced a second time. And so I'm dealing with that, but it's also just like the pain around going through such a hard separation and our families and everybody that's involved. So,
well, thank you for your vulnerability. And, you said a few moments ago, this is one of the things that connects us. And to see people who are in the field of love and relationships being real to say, look, I'm also human. Yes. I think that gives permission for others to really self-reflect, have self-compassion, get curious. Because that's a big burden to carry. I mean, I struggled with the shame of my breakup with John of like, shit, we actually have joint clients. We actually did couples work with these clients. And what do you mean two therapists couldn't figure it out? Like, it was hard to say out loud and to admit, but it also acknowledged our humanness.
Yes. And relationships are hard.
Relationships are hard. Love isn't enough, no matter how much we always know cognitively. Putting it into practice is sometimes a different ballgame.
Yeah.
In all your years of Real Love Ready, what are some of your favorite, whether anecdotes or tools that someone listening right now who's identifying of, shit, this is hard. What do I do? Or what's the thing to practice? What are some of your go-to practices or, like I said, anecdotes that might help a listener right now who's identifying with what we're talking about?
It's it just comes to mind because I just think about the incredible people that I'm in contact with on a regular basis. Last week, I interviewed Sue Johnson, and she is the creator and pioneer of emotionally focused therapy. And I've been looking forward to meeting this woman for a very long time. And when I read her book, because I read a book a week, and so I feel like I've got quite a good base of knowledge when it comes to relationships and skills. But let's talk about implementation. But what I really resonated with her work, because it really is about understanding. It goes beyond attachment theory, and she says actually we are wired for attachment. We are wired for connection. We know this, right? And it's not so much about changing who we are. It's about understanding each other from this deepest level. Yeah. And seeing that this behavior or this argument is not what it's about. Yeah. And if you're able to take a step back, which is, what all of our greatest teachers are teaching us. Like Terry Real would talk about, I'm not my adult self right now. I'm acting like the 6-year-old that, didn't get the attention he needed or wanted or needed from his family. Okay. So, but I'm acting like the 6-year-old right now. And but it's like, if you can be more of the observer in those examples, it's not easy. And then operate from this place of seeing that and then being in your vulnerable self. This is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like you're not seeing me. You're not hearing me. I miss you. Like I feel like I'm walking around in this house and I'm like so lonely, even though we're sleeping next to each other in the bed. That's not a good feeling for me. Yeah. So that sounds very different than, why are you late? Like you didn't show up. You're not coming home from, I can give a million examples of how
just owning your experience. Yeah.
Yes, owning your experience. So that was a huge, I'm thinking, Robin, you have to do more of this, even with my kids, which is people in my life,
Yeah.
right? Um, and Jody Carrington, she says she's all about feeling just it's so important that we see each other. And so she's saying the same thing. How we've become very disconnected in our
Mm-hmm.
behaviors and how we are with each other. Like,
Yeah.
you go to a restaurant and I saw a family, I was with my girlfriends and we're having a nice time. I look over and the whole family of four is on their phones. They're not talking to each other. This is what's going on, right? It's not uncommon. So
No.
um, it's getting to the root of what we need from each other and being able to
Yeah.
communicate that in actually quite simple terms.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so easier said than done when you're in the heightened moment of
It
reactivity
is.
or anger or
And that's why we need
fear
therapists
or
to teach us
pain.
all those like right?
Yeah, and that's honestly where I continue to come back to mindfulness as a foundation to that, because that's better or more easy to be able to access when you have an individual practice of awareness and naming, where you're at and what you're experiencing. When I was going through my divorce and I had been practicing mindfulness and meditation for a handful of years, thank God at that point, because I had the ability to name in real time my experience without judging it, without trying to fix it or push it away or deny it or resist it or judge it or push it down or whatever. And I would literally say to myself, this is what sadness feels like. Can I let it be okay to be sad? And I would just breathe. Or this is what fear feels like, or this is what anxiety, like, just to be able to have the awareness and to name it. And we know from neuroscience that naming it helps quiet down your emotional brain. So your reactivity is going to go down. And it's easier to do that with a partner when you have that within yourself, right? So to be able to have that foundation of self-awareness before we could try to have self-awareness during partnership at its heightened point of reactivity, right? Like, we need
Right.
these building blocks, because sometimes that we can do that when we are our wise adult self, but usually when we're feeling it, we're not. And we need to have that pathway built.
Yeah.
Way easier said than done, but always a good practice to intend to fall back on and to name, because yeah, we are wired for connection.
Yeah. I was on your website earlier and did your present moment meditation before we started.
Mm.
And and it's like what, 8 minutes, seven
Yeah.
minutes. And you don't need a long time to get centered and back into your body because
Yeah.
there's so many, like I know for myself, I mean, the practice of embodiment, like I'll be in my head, right? I'm too much in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in my body. Robin, you're not breathing. Oh, you have to go pee. What the heck, man? You've been sitting here for 2 hours. You
Yeah.
probably had to go pee like 2 hours ago. Like, or I'm thirsty. Like I'm not paying
Yeah.
attention to even what's in my body. Like I'm not in my body. So
Yeah.
the mindfulness piece is just, it's because I think that even that term, because it's like about your mind, but it's actually being in your whole self.
You know what?
Right.
It's actually, there's the Eastern symbol for mindfulness. We here in the West translate that as mindfulness. In the East, it's actually translated as heartfulness.
Heartfulness.
It's getting out of our mind and into our body. So we here in the
Right.
West already inherently screw it up by trying to make it cognitive and, believe our thoughts to be our truth. And if it's
Mhm.
rational, it must be real, right? Which not always the case.
No, our
No.
minds are constantly playing tricks on us.
Oh, constantly. Yeah, I was thinking when you were sharing your tip with the emotionally focused therapy, two things. One, just as a funny aside, because I brought up a piece, but I think you'd get a kick out of this. So I actually met John on Tinder,
Yes.
and I've told this story before here on the podcast, but it's so funny. And he actually asked me out for that night, and I couldn't go out that night. I had my
Mhm.
kids, so we made an appointment for lunch the next day. But that night I went to bed reading Psychology Today. And the article I was reading was on couples therapy. And I've been trained in Gottman's work. And so
Mhm.
the article was a combination of talking about Gottman and Sue Johnson. Well, I had never read her book and I wasn't deeply familiar with it. So I was really enjoying reading this article. This was, almost 10 years ago, 8 years ago. The next day, I walk into the restaurant to meet John for lunch, and he's reading the Sue Johnson book from the
Oh,
article the night before. And
I
I was
love
like,
the synchronicities in life.
oh, oh my
That's
goodness. And
beautiful.
yeah, so that's just a quick funny story. But what I
Yeah.
was gonna say is, one of my favorite things, because we do get so disconnected. I say to all my clients all the time, do you guys do a weekly check? And they're like, what do you mean? And because we get transactional. We just are
Yes.
roommates and we're ships passing in the night and we're talking about the schedules, the bills, the kids, who has to be what, where, who's going to be home for dinner. And we forget to remember to be partners. And so one of the things that John and I have done that I talk with all my clients about is to do a weekly check-in in which there's two questions. How did I make you feel loved this week? And what could I have done to make you feel more loved?
Yeah.
And that's a great
Two
question
powerful questions.
but even for couples who are struggling, that's even too much, right? So we could even like soften that to, how did you feel connected this week? How did you feel disconnected, right? So we can use some softer language, but unless we're checking in on those connection points, we keep missing each other.
Oh, yes. And you see this in couples or people that have been together for so long, they're not checking in. And you're walking around like strangers. You're talking to your best friends and your family about things that are going on with you and not your partner.
Yeah.
And it just becomes this, you know, bigger and bigger gap. So I love that weekly exercise that you and John do.
Yeah.
And the appreciation piece. Terry Cole talked about this at the summit last year. I loved it. She's like, I didn't like, you're not my assistant. He's not my assistant. He's my partner. And so when he
Mm-hmm.
takes the garbage out, thank you so much, sweetheart. She's like, it
Yes.
didn't take me much to say thank you, but it sure he made the effort to take the garbage out. So it's just and she's like, these are not minor acknowledgments. These are big things because, like she said, he doesn't work for me and he
Yeah.
doesn't have to do these things, but it does. It's all about seeing what you're giving and bringing to each other.
Yeah, and it's so easy. And again, we know our brain is wired for negativity bias. So we're going to be drawn to focusing on all the little problems. So it actually is work to look for the good. And then you see more of the good. And then you create that culture of gratitude and
Right.
appreciation. And then it builds because we're going to have those inevitable negative withdrawals from our emotional buckets, right? We've got to find the ways to fill it back up. And I love how you did the
Yeah.
meditation. Thank you for doing that as a way of grounding before a call. I love that so much. But people have to say, oh, I don't have time to meditate. Okay, that's fine. I get it. You can also do
Mhm.
it in like a minute and it can still be effective and get you grounded and centered. And people also say, oh, but I don't have time to check in with my partner. Well, do you
Yes, you
have time
do.
for a fight? Because I guarantee you didn't schedule a time for the fight you just had, right? Do
Right.
you got time to ruminate over your disconnections? I guarantee you don't have time for that on your calendar, but it's coming up. So
Right. You hear the same thing around scheduling sex. It's like you put that in your calendar because it's important. You want to do it. It feels good. Schedule it in. Just,
yeah,
just like scheduling the workouts in or scheduling the meetings. Like
yeah,
time with your partner needs to be scheduled. And and I know that doesn't sound very romantic, but what's more romantic than actually scheduling that time that's in your calendar and it's like showing each other your priorities
yeah.
to each
It's
other.
honoring.
Priorities.
I value enough to put everything else aside. Yeah, it may
Right.
not be super sexy and spontaneous, but connection, especially long-term relationships, you got to find ways to stay creative and keep that relationship alive, especially when we've got so many things pulling our attention. I just got back. I was in John and I were in Africa for 3.5 weeks, and we just got back. As the time you and I are recording this, we've only been home for about a week and a half, and we were on vacation for 6 of the days in South Africa in Cape Town, and then 18 days was safari in Kenya and Tanzania.
Wow.
And there was 11 people in our group, and we were the kids.
Yeah.
I didn't really realize that safaris really many younger people don't go on because I get it. It's costly and it's a long time away.
Yes.
And most everyone in our group was like 75 years old. And there was this one couple there who second marriage for both. They'd been together for over 20 years. And we're talking about their relationship and what has made them strong. And I loved this so much. She said it was in their wedding vows to one another, in which they said, are you willing to be willing for whatever it
Mm.
is? And I found that so simple and so powerful, because sometimes we're not willing to do something because it's hard or scary or vulnerable or overwhelming or triggering, whatever it is. So it's not just being willing to show up, right? But it's to be willing when you don't have the will to want to do the thing. And
Right.
does that
I
speak
think
to
that's,
you? Like, is that beautiful?
I really think I absolutely, because you don't know what's going to come. Like none of us know what's coming into our future. Well,
Yeah.
it's going to be good, but there's also going to be really bad. So if you're going to make that promise to each other, that commitment that you're going to be willing to be willing for whatever comes up.
Yeah. I thought that was such a beautiful and simple reminder.
Mm-hmm.
So with Real Love Ready, I mean, we're talking both like this, kind of personal experience, but also this very meta experience of what you're creating for others. Share a little bit more about your upcoming summit. Like, what do you hope to create for people in the weekends, in the environment, and the connections? What's some of your
Yeah.
overall intentions of the macro level of what you're doing?
Well, so last year it was an evening on Friday and full day Saturday. And this year we are also adding on Sunday workshops. I had a lot of my family and friends attend because they were supporting Robin Ducharme, right? But and then they leave there, and the feedback, like from people that attended, was amazing. And for instance, I got one of my cousins. He's like, Robin, my marriage is so much better because we came together. And I'm like, this is why I do this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because
Yeah,
if our relationships are so important, and if I'm helping create an experience and learning where you can come together and take those into your life and improve your
yeah,
life, how beautiful.
yeah,
So, we've got 10 incredible teachers that are going to lead us through the weekend. And there's always amazing food and live music. And I think the best part is sitting in that room with other people and sharing, because that's we how we learn is by
yeah,
sharing our stories with each other and making those connections, making new friends, and just experiencing, the whole thing. And you leaving there feeling higher vibration than you did before, and
yeah,
ready to, when you attend something you just feel so good about. Like
yeah.
that's what I endeavor to create. So it's in April next year, April 12th, 13th, 14th in Vancouver. So I hope the people join us that are listening. And you
Oh,
can join virtually if you can't come in person. So
and I love it. And to have been in that room, I mean, there were hundreds of people there. So congrats on the success of that. But it is palpable when you're in a space with everyone who's got a shared intention, whether it's to
right.
learn, to connect, to deepen, to grow, to have new skills, right? I mean, this is, I think more than ever, Robin, and I don't say this lightly, we're craving connection more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah, we are.
And
And
we don't
I
always know
was
how to
so
do it, but we're craving it. So sorry to cut you off. What were you
yeah.
saying?
Oh, I know. I was going to say that I was so happy and grateful that there was a lot of couples there. I mean, you and John were there together. There was a lot of couples, which obviously you don't have to be in a couple. You can come. It doesn't matter your relationship status. But I was very impressed with also the amount of men that came, because there's a
Yeah,
lot of I go to self-help learning development things all the time, and a lot of time it's majority women. Um,
yeah.
so it was nice to see that there's just and you know it doesn't matter. Everybody's welcome, right? We can all learn.
Well, and I think, having also great male speakers draws in more men so they don't feel so alone in a room with all women.
Right. Exactly. That
Because
helps too. This
sometimes,
year,
sometimes you need that, kind of real life role modeling.
yeah, this year we have four men speaking.
Awesome.
So Gabor Mate and John Kim and Todd Barretts and Sean Galanos. And so there's a panel of 10, and it's going to be incredible. So I hope you
I hope
come, Jory.
I know, I hope I can make it. I'm going to make a point of it because I so loved last year. And also, it was such an amazing place to connect. I mean, as a therapist who a lot of your speakers are my teachers, right? And yet to connect personally and professionally And, since then I've had Terry on my podcast and
I
Danielle.
know.
Like, it's just so amazing it's connection on all levels, right? It literally is. And I have to just share this because it's just so top of mind. I went to Africa for the animals, but what I got really was the people. And I didn't recognize the extent to which I was going to have the people be the biggest takeaway. I don't care if you're in the middle of absolutely nowhere with a tribe. We had many different tribal experiences who, one of them only speaks the click language. They're hunter and gatherers, like they wear animal skins. It's all about connection, Robin.
Wow.
Like literally, it's all about connection through a smile, eye contact, a hug. Like we are all craving it. And I just experienced, being 7,000 miles away in the most remote of places. And the power of connection was incredible.
Yeah.
And even the vulnerability just to say hi to somebody. I mean, at my lodge, at one of the lodges one night during happy hours, getting a bowl of popcorn, and there was a woman standing next to me. I just said, "Hi, how are you? Where are you from?" Turns out she lives a mile from me.
Wow.
I'm like,
right?
And like,
what are the chances? Like that woman, that person right there is like a new friend.
Right. And my point is, like, we don't often take the step to just say hi to somebody. And when we don't do that, we fail to miss the opportunity potentially for a very human connection.
Yes.
So I just, at the end of the day, what we're talking about, whether it's romantic love, friendship love, companionate love, professional love, like whatever it is, it's why I do the podcast. It's about connecting because these conversations fill me up so much.
Me too.
To have the context to just dive in and be real and authentic and.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that we had this time together and I thank you. I feel very grateful.
Me too. So Robin, how can people find you? Where is the best way to connect? And especially if they want to come to your beautiful summit in April, what's the best way for that?
Our website is realloveready.com and Instagram, Real Love Ready, and Facebook, Real Love Ready. So I hope our podcast
easy
is called
to
Let's
find.
Talk Love.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, on this point of connection, I'm so grateful that you and I have connected, and I hope to continue to stay connected because this is how we support each other through the real times and the hard times. And all relationships need, that time and attention, and obviously the work around to build us up where we need and the tools. And so thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm so grateful for the platform that you've created. And I really hope to be there in Vancouver also because it's just a beautiful city to showcase the work that you're holding space for. So if you guys have never been to Vancouver and are inspired by Robin, I really hope you guys can make it up there. I hope I can attend as well. Robin, thank you so much. I really appreciate your vulnerability as well. I hope that inspires our listeners to find their own place of authenticity and to connect deeper with themselves so they can connect with others. If this episode spoke to you, I would really love a rating, a review, a share so we can help others journey forward to healthy and thriving relationships. And I hope that you all take care and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.